Yeah, so yeah, my name is Andy Volpe, and I've been since about 2004-ish, I started doing traditional old master type printmaking, like Rembrandt and Albert Dürer, my two printing heroes, not necessarily in that order, since about 2004-ish. And right now I'm working with the printing office of Eads and Gill, which is in Boston, next to the Old North Church. And we've got the two types of printing presses that were used by the colonists during the Revolution and before. These are just scale models. This is nothing. So you got a letter press. You know, think of the same thing like Ben Franklin. You got movable type that you have to assemble into a frame, place that frame on what's called a carriage, and then ink it up, put a piece of paper in between these pieces here, known as a tympan and frisket. And then you'd slide it underneath what's called the platen, that's the squishy part, and you'd pull the bar, and then that would squish. This particular model has been around, they've been around since like the 1960s, and it was originally advertised as a Gutenberg press, but some of the components, the problem is that we actually don't know what Gutenberg's press looked like. It doesn't survive. But we think it had a straight pull bar and it had a wooden screw. So, like I said, this is just a generalized printing press. These, of course, 1440, 1450, and then somewhere around the 1450s or 60s, we've got presses like this with rollers, and this is going to print copper plates. We actually don't know when, where, or who was the first to start figuring out I can print off of a copper plate that I cut the lines into and then inked up. We're not sure when that happens. That's a whole other discussion for, I've got slide programs and things like that. I can go into endless hours of boring details, college professor style, and put you all to sleep. But in either case, what you're doing with engraving is you're taking a tool called a burin or a graver, and you're carving lines into the copper plate. Those lines are going to hold ink. You then take ink, rub it into those lines, and carefully wipe the surface ink off the surface of the plate. And then you run it through the rolling press. And that will push the paper onto the copper. And what you end up with, of course, is a print. And if you look carefully at these prints, you'll see an outline of the copper plate. That's what we call a plate mark today. It was kind of an unsightly thing in the 16th and 17th and 18th centuries. But now that it got revived as a fine art in the 1860s, think of James McNeill Whistler, Whistler's mother. He got into this revival with French artists who were taking thicker paper with a really heavy impression, and that's where the term "make a good impression" comes from. Comes from this stuff.
Okay. Can I ask a question? Or yeah. What's the difference between a print and an etching? Are they the same thing?
Oh, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
I'm getting there. Yeah. So prints in general come from either press. And they're both called impressions. But you're making multiple copies. That's the idea. So engraving is the tool. You're mechanically carving lines into the plate. What we're going to be doing tonight is what's referred to as a dry point, where you're just taking a needle and scratching the surface. And that scratching will raise up a little burr of, in this case, copper. You got plexiglass. And that little burr will hold a little bit of extra ink. And that'll give you kind of like a sfumato, like a smoky, airbrushy sort of effect in the print. The thing is, you have to keep in mind is that you have to hand wipe this. So if you got burrs of copper, it's not really a good idea. So they didn't really. So the prints tend to be pretty kind of black and kind of modelly, whereas the engraving, you got nice, crisp, sharp lines, and you can go over the surface once you've kind of polished it and got it ready to print. Then you've got etching. Etching is specifically an acid technique. So you coat the plate in an acid-resistant varnish or beeswax. You then bake it so that it becomes hard on the plate. It is black, so you got a nice black and white contrast as you scratch your design into the plate or through the wax. You then pour acid on it, or nowadays you put it in a tank and immerse it, and that acid will cut the lines for you. They're using ferric chloride in the 1600s. We're still using ferric chloride today. It's a pretty safe acid. So before we get too far on that, the reason I've been doing engraving for so long is because that studio just down the road in Whitensville, I didn't know if I could actually have acid on site, and I didn't want to deal with the fumes and the chemicals and all that stuff. So I actually went to engraving because it was a dry technique. I didn't have to worry about chemicals all that much, other than the oil. It's oil-based ink, so it's pretty easy to work with. And I also wanted to be closer to the 1500s because I was studying Albert Dürer and those artists in like Germany and Italy in the Renaissance, and that's what they were doing. So Rembrandt is doing what's called etching and engraving. He's actually combining the two. He would do a basic outline in etching, and then he'd take his engraving tool or a needle and scratch or carve lines into the plate to add more tonal value. I did this plate in 2004 at the Worcester Art Museum. They just closed a Rembrandt exhibit, which was absolutely amazing. And I was there on Saturday printing and dressed 1630s, because I do living history stuff, printing as Rembrandt. So kids got to print this little certificate, which is what that copper plate is, where they can put their name on it and show it off to their friends that they're certified as a printer in the old master style. For kids of all ages. So they had a series of exhibits at the art museum, rotated like every couple months, of different printmaking techniques. So they had engraving and dry point. They had with actual original Albert Dürers. They had Rembrandt etching in the 1600s. They had lithography, which is working on stone. So I was doing this at the same time they had this Rembrandt exhibit. So we were in there like every other class, just studying the work. And then I find out that he was doing this combined technique. So I fell in love with it right away. So I started doing more and more of the old master stuff. Rewind to 1996, I'm at Westfield State College, and unfortunately it's kind of hard to see. I did this owl, short-eared owl, in the middle on plexiglass, which is what you're going to be doing in a couple of minutes. So, full circle. So then I did that print, and that was the hook. That's what got me into this whole printing business in the first place. Around 2014, I actually took the plate, dusted it off, and I added those 4 vignettes around the corners with my engraving tools and the needle.
Do you like the plastic better than the copper?
Well, I've been doing the copper so much that I actually like working on copper, but plexiglass is fine. Yeah, so this is way cheaper. Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the other thing. So I'm going to try to talk a little bit about alternative materials. So yeah, this is the one that got me started in this whole printing thing, and specifically, so all these techniques on plate is referred to as intaglio. It's spelled intaglio, but it's Italian, and I'm Italian, so it's intaglio. And it actually means to engrave in Italian. So you've got engraving, dry point, and etching, which is the chemical, the acid. You also have what's called mezzotint, which I haven't done yet, and I'm trying to get my courage up to try it. You have to take a special rocking tool, rocker, which is a sawtoothed hand tool, and you have to what's called rock the plate. So you're putting thousands of little dots all across the plate, and you have to do a particular pattern. So when you ink it up and print it, the entire thing prints black. Then you take scrapers and burnishers and scrape off the copper and polish it, so you bring the light out of the blackness. So like I said, everything that you're going to do inside the plate, that's what's going to print. Any kind of scratch will hold an inked line, will hold the ink, and it will print. So that's something you need to keep in mind. And everything, of course, has to be done backwards in all the printing techniques. So keep that in mind too as you think about your design. Anyway, so mezzotint, you rock the plate. It just takes hours to do that. It was invented in the 1600s in the Netherlands, and it was designed, you could do multiple layers of these plates, and you could reproduce paintings like you'd see in these new fangled things called museums. And that started to become a thing in the Netherlands in the 1600s. So if you want to buy a reproduction, usually scaled down, of an old master painting, you could buy these prints, but it'd take months to develop these. Covered all those, yeah. And then we've got somebody like Paul Revere, which I'm currently copying and reproducing his work and his technique in Boston. He's doing engraving. He's actually a silversmith. So the funny thing with this whole intaglio process is developed by silver and goldsmiths, because they're using the same tools on jewelry and metal plate. There's an Italian technique called niello, where you take a little piece of silver and you carve lines into it, usually with cross-hatching to hold more niello, which is this black tar-like substance. It's almost like an enamel, almost like enameling. You then bake that onto the plate and then you polish it, so you get a nice black and white contrast, usually religious, devotional stuff. Somewhere, like I said, in the 1450s, somebody, I'm thinking, accidentally put their hand on the plate and the image was impressed on their hand. Like, hey, wait a minute. We also see etching develop around the 15 teens with Daniel Hopfer in Germany. He's an armor decorator. So when you have these, we go to the Higgins Armory at the Worcester Art Museum, you'll see armors on display and you'll have etched decorations all over them. There's a particular style called tapestry from the very popular in the 1570s and 1590s, where they're just covered in all this decoration. So the etcher coats the armor plate, like say it's the arm armor, coats it in wax, carves the design into it, etches it with some pretty horrendous chemicals, and then applies that black stuff and then polishes it out. And there's your, they could also inlay of gold using mercury vapor, which is not recommended. But they would decorate these armors, and I think somewhere along the line, Daniel Hopfer is usually credited with maybe preserving his design or something like that. We're not sure. Like I said, at some point these goldsmiths and silversmiths start copying their prints to then sell, and almost like in Sears catalogs. You can go through the book and say, I want that on my ring, signet ring or whatever. And then we start seeing them being used for decorative art and graphics.
So the printing process came first, and then the silversmiths and goldsmiths learned from the printers?
Well Gutenberg, he actually worked for a short period of time in a mint, carving the dies to mint metal coins. So he's a metal worker. He understands metal, and one of the easiest metals he can work with is lead and tin, because they're easy to melt and they have different properties. If you combine the two, he ends up figuring out that type metal, which is lead, tin, and antimony. And he was able to make the punches to make the dies to make the type. That's really what his secret was. Wow. They've been doing it in China with bronze and bone and ceramic and wood since like the 200s AD. But they're ridiculously expensive. There are hundreds of Chinese characters and phrases. So you have to have trays upon trays of these circular trays that you would have to rotate and find the letters. It would take eons to make a print. And there was also a lot of government control in the press. Gutenberg figured it out with metal, and he starts doing that in the 1440s. Almost immediately he gets in trouble with the church, because one of the first things he prints before the Bible is what are called indulgences, which is your get out of hell free card. If you've donated X amount of money to the church, you'll get this printed certificate with the Pope's name on it, granting you passage past the gates. And Martin Luther was like, no, I don't think so. And then Luther finds out how powerful that press is, because now we can print hundreds, if not thousands, of pamphlets with this Protestant Reformation. And that of course, starts problems. So we start seeing the church and the state going after printing shops because of the stuff that they're printing. And that goes all the way through the American Revolution and beyond. Even the American Civil War, we've got abolitionist printers where their print shops are broken into and burnt to the ground. And the papers are strewn out in the streets, and their presses are broken, and the printers have their lives threatened, things like that. So it's kind of the same old story. So that whole freedom of the press thing that's why it's a big deal in 1776. So anyway, that's all letterpress stuff. That's just letters. We start seeing wood blocks cut at the same height as the metal type, and you can put a whole page together with illustrations. We see that around 1460 something. Before that, before Gutenberg, 12, 13, 1400, we have wooden blocks where you have the image cut out and all the words cut out. But if you damage it or it gets worn out, that's it. You have to start all over again. Gutenberg, with all that metal type, you can either recast the lead type or you can rearrange it to just do the whole new page. You just have to do the block separately. So you got this whole industry that's producing all these woodblock prints to go with letterpress text. Somewhere around the 1500s, we start seeing copper plates introduced with letterpress. But you have to have a window, text, blank spot, text, and you have to eyeball and print it afterwards. After the text has been printed, the engravers then have to eyeball the plate in between that window and print it with the illustration in there. And part of the problem with this type of printing is that you can't print on the back on the letterpress of the page. So you have these blank spots. Or what they'll do is just do a completely separate page of just the illustration, and they'll bind that in with the text. By the 1730s, we're seeing magazines starting to become a hot thing, and they have illustrations being added in them. By the 1730s, you'll have a separate page tapped into or tipped into the middle of the book. So all the books that we all grew up with, where it says go to plate A or plate 1, you have to go to the middle of the book, and it's a slightly different paper, like for the photographs and things like that, and you have to find the plate. That's where it's coming from copper plates. It gets replaced by the 1830s with what's called wood engraving. You're using engraving tools, but you're cutting it to print in relief with the movable type text. Harper's Weekly, Winslow Homer, Leslie's Illustrated News, those are all wood engravings that are all blocked together to make these giant images. I don't want to go on for too long. We'll show off a little bit more. So the other thing you can do with both wood blocks and engravings is you can color them in. I call it paint by number style. And that's exactly what I do. So they have whole industries devoted to coloring prints. So you have something as simple as a number of stencils. So person 1 does blue, person 2 does yellow, green, any kind of colors you're doing. But we also start to see in the 1500s a rise of what are called chapbooks, really cheaply, crudely printed on the cheapest paper, super thin, with the most unglamorous imagery you can imagine, like quite literally for kids books, they're like kid quality images. Like have somebody draw a crayon, image of a bird or whatever, and you're cutting that out as quickly as you can. You're printing it, and you're slapping like 1 or 2 colors on it, and it could be off center by a mile, but that's okay. You got color on your print. You can sell it for a little extra, and that we're starting to see those books coming around. So yeah, that's that Golden Eagle. I also have this. This is a dry point and etching. I also did this around the same time that I did this one at the Art Museum. This is a straight engraving on copper plate, ferruginous hawk. Everybody sees this and they say, oh look, what a nice owl. It's not, it's a hawk. It even says at the bottom, hawk. I'm a bird nerd, so you get me arguing on birds. I'll identify it, and then I can also color these. And then we've got all the Rembrandt stuff. I'm sorry, Paul Revere. Oh, that was by the end of the day on Saturday, I was Revere/Rembrandt. I couldn't get the two straight. So in 2020, in March, I did a full-size replica of Revere's most infamous print of propaganda. It's called the Boston Massacre. Mine is one of only 2, as far as I can tell. Colonial Williamsburg is the other one. They do one in 2015 of the Boston Massacre, done exactly the same way that Revere did it, same size. The funny thing with Revere is that this is not his design. He steals this from a guy named Henry Pelham, who's related to John Singleton Copley, a very prominent portrait artist in Boston. Pelham draws this image, and he's intending to publish it in the newspaper. Revere shows up in the paper a week before Pelham's. Pelham shows up a week later, and it's called an original print, taken on the spot. But this isn't what happens during the massacre, because Pelham wasn't there. Revere was. So this is not what happens during the massacre. All the eyewitness accounts in the trial, which happens in November, completely dismisses this as any kind of accurate depiction. But for months, this is what people see, and they see soldiers killing innocent civilians protesting their right as Englishmen, and that's a whole other crazy story. So then fast forward to 1770, so this is 1770. In 75, Revere gets a contract during the Revolution to print paper money. But there's a blockade in the harbor, and he's a known criminal. He's a known rebel from the Sons of Liberty. He can't buy copper in England, which you had to do for the last 100 years. You had to buy your materials from England and ship it in. It was an importation act, several of them. So if it's got several copper plates to Paul Revere, here's his address. The troops will just follow it right to him, and they'll arrest him for treason. So he reuses the back of the plate. He cuts off the top and the bottom flips the plate over and engraves paper money on the back of the plate. And that's why the plate survives today. So we actually have the plate in the State Archive. However, it's just the image. So I had to reconstruct the words on the top and the bottom. And like I said, you have to engrave everything backwards. Doing the image is hard enough. Doing the letters backwards is a whole other ballgame. But Revere had been doing silver work as a silversmith on teapots and things like that for almost 30 years before he starts getting into image making, and then he, of course, gets all political. But so he does all this kind of work on copper plate, and I also colored them. So this is copied from the colored original that's at the American Antiquarian Society. So now that's my little claim to fame in some ways, is doing that. I've done a number of other of this work, and then my most recent project is this guy, what I call the Boston Tea Party. This is done as a commemorative print. Revere doesn't do any image of the Tea Party and the tea actually being destroyed, because if we actually show ourselves destroying the tea, we're going to get arrested for treason. We're already in enough trouble as it is dumping the tea in the harbor. So I came up with a composite. I came up with an idea. What would Revere have done? So I took this view of Boston that he does, what's called the Landing of the Troops in 1770 and 1774, and I changed it around a little bit. I have the 3 ships from the angle of Griffin's Wharf in South Boston, where the Boston Tea Party ships are now. Fort Point Channel is basically where the Tea Party happened. Here's another funny, quirky trivia thing. It wasn't even called the Tea Party until the 1830s, after everybody all died. Because they all swore on to their deathbed that they would not reveal who was involved and what they did. So, and after 1830, all those guys who've been doing this stuff had all basically died, and now we end up with all these stories of what they supposedly did on that night. So anyway, I did this just in time, like the week before I finally finished engraving it, of the actual Boston Tea Party that they did in Boston, which was nuts. My girlfriend Caroline Bigelow was active with the Daughters of the American Revolution, and the Boston Tea Party Ships Museum got through donation several tons of actual tea from the same company that still makes the tea today, Denison Company. It's really good tea, by the way. Which is funny because the tea that they dumped in the harbor was like the lowest grade tea you can possibly get. It's like arguing about Dunkin' Donuts coffee, which I don't drink coffee. I know, shocker, right? Dunkin' Donuts coffee is like the cheapest grade coffee you can get, but everybody loves it because it tastes really good. Whereas 1774, you've got this tea from the East India Company, but that's, again, a whole other story. So we have a letterpress from Colonial Williamsburg that they built in the 1940s. We've done some work on it, a little bit of restoration work, and we print on it. We print the Declaration of Independence. And then we've got an original 1740s rolling press from France, one of only 4 known to exist in the world. It's the only one on the Western Hemisphere. And then we have an exact size copy of it. And then this is my scale model of it.
When you say where are these presses?
This is in Boston. This is that printing office of Gill. So Gary Gregory is the one who created the printing office. And then he was at a printing demo at the Museum of Printing that I'm also involved with, which is up now in Haverhill. It was actually originally in North Andover. And he's dressed colonial, printing a cut down version of the Boston Massacre with just the image. So I'm like, well, he's a fellow living historian, fellow reenactor. He's doing a copper plate, and he's doing Paul Revere. I need to know this guy. So I introduced myself. I said, I do copper plate engraving. I do what Rembrandt does. He's like, Rembrandt, that's really cool. Who cares? You should do Paul Revere instead. I'm like, okay, fair enough. So then I started talking with him quite a bit, and we started talking shop. And eventually I was showing him my engravings and showing him what I could do. And he's like, okay, here's the spare plate. He had 2 made at the same time of this massacre. And if you can make it look like it looked originally, we can work together. I'm like, okay, so I reworked the plate, printed I think at least 1,000 prints off of that plate. And then 2020, I knew I wanted a full-size replica, so that's what I embarked on in 2019.
You keep saying 1940 for this. Do you mean 1490?
I'm sorry. The press in Boston was built by Colonial Williamsburg originally in the 1940s. They copied a 1750 50s original press down in Williamsburg. That's just a model. The model kit of that was made around the 1960s, I think. So we're starting to see this. But yeah, again, these are just kind of generalized models. So a couple other materials to think about. You got plexiglass, which you can easily get at the Home Depot and things like that. I was taking a class with a printer at the Art Museum a couple years later, and he just went to the Home Depot and got flashing, chimney flashing, steel chimney flashing. And you can scratch it, and it can actually produce a print. The hardest thing with this whole printing stuff is the tools and the press. So this was a couple $100. I couldn't remember what I had spent on. But if you can get your hands on renting a press, or like the art museum taking a class, you can supposedly take a burnisher and push down hard enough onto the paper and actually make a print. But I've even heard of people using their car or their truck. They put the plate between and paper between two pieces of cardboard, and they run it over, and that's just enough pressure to push down.
Does it stay in place?
I haven't tried it, but I assume it does.
We have a fellow artist that developed a hand printer.
Yeah, and then there's a little tiny one you can get that's 3D printed.
I have it somewhere. They're
out there on the internet. There's also people were getting mangles, laundry mangles, to wring out laundry, and they converted them into rolling presses.
I've better that people that do scrapbooking use that are using them.
Yeah, kind of the same idea. Yeah. There's even like almost like a rolling pin roller that you can, metal rolling pin you can roll across.
Look at this thing. This is a Sasha palm press. Will that work?
Try it. I haven't used them myself, but I've seen them. Yeah, you can roll that across. You need a lot more pressure to print the copper plates than you do in the engravings than you do for the letterpress. Because letterpress, you think of it like a glorified metal rubber stamp. It's what's called relief printing. You're just printing off the surface. This, you have to physically force the paper down into the lines. And in order to do that, you have to have a nice soft cotton or linen paper, and you have to soak it in water. This particular paper we're going to be using tonight is known as Somerset Book. It's available through Jerry's Artorama, one of my favorite go-to suppliers. It's fairly affordable. Most of these papers are like $1 or $2 per sheet, so you have to think about that. And that, if you have a nice small plate, you can get several prints out of a sheet. But if you do larger and larger, that will run you some expense. I also have Johano, which is made by Canson Company, and I also got it through Jerry's Artorama. Technically, it's one-sided, but for today's workshop, you don't have to worry about it. And you can get different types of paper too, different colored, different shades, and that will affect the whole mood. So, like that little barn owl that I did on the metal plate, I ended up using a reddish brownish ink, and that changes the whole mood. That tall ship that I did with all sorts of different, I had a graphite colored ink that I'd used, and I also had like a grayish bluish paper, and it made a really different tone to the plate. So you can control all of that through the paper choice. And once you get into printing, like I said, once the ink gets in your blood, it's hard to get out. You become a severe paper snob really easily. You can use a really thick paper like Reese BFK or this Johano. Or you can use a super thin. That Somerset Book is super thin. But you want 100% cotton. That's really what you're looking for. So while you're working on these, I'll start soaking up the paper. I've got a little sheet of plexiglass. Hopefully I got enough for everybody. Just peel off both backings. If there's a real burr, I try to bevel the edges as quickly and economically as I could. That's the other thing too, is that you don't want a nice sharp square edge, because that will cut the paper as it goes through the press. And it can also damage your blankets. And these are really expensive. These are fur blankets. And you need 3 layers. You need a catcher, which catches the sizing, the glue of the paper, and helps absorb some of the moisture. And then you've got a pusher and a puller. a slightly medium weight, and a heavy weight. And that makes your 3 layers. You need that for printing. I've gotten away with just one really thick blanket, but if you really want to be doing a lot of printing and doing a lot of different techniques and things like that, you really want the 3 layers. So that's my elevator speech.
Andy, let me ask you a question. When we're doing our etching, when we make a mark, is that going to be black when it's printed or white?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
You can do a really thin line. You can try different areas if you want different corners with how hard you push.
Okay.
Just a light scratch will be like a hairline that will show up. I'll talk a little bit more about inking when we're all kind of ready to go for all printing. I'll try to do it like everybody will just go through and print. I'll show you how it's done and then let you get your hands inky if you want. And I'm happy to get my hands inky. So the other thing I forgot to say is that you want to bevel the edges about a 45-degree angle around the edges of the plate, because any sharp square edge will, like I said, damage the paper and possibly your blankets. So I try to bevel them as best I can. If there's a real sharp, I don't even know what it's called, little edge of plexiglass, I've got my tools. I can scrape it down kind of quickly and do that. Or you can just use your thumbnail. That should be able to kind of peel off the little scrum of the plexi.
I have scissors. Do you want me to give them scissors to cut off the corners, or?
Mine are beveled.
Okay.
I rounded the corners. You can round the corners on these too.
Okay.
The flashing, you don't need to really bevel the corners unless you want to. It's especially if you're using a thick paper, it's not going to push in hard enough to cut the paper. But with these guys, I hopefully have it adjusted that it won't be too bad. So yeah, now's your time to.
Is there a right or wrong side to etch on? Oh yeah.
If you feel for the bevel and the bevel pointing upwards, that's your surface. So I ended up with a non-glare. So the non-glare side should face down, and then the shiny side should face up. That's what you're going to be carving, is the shiny side.
Shiny.
So this is up?
Yes. If you notice, that's dull.
That's shiny.
If you have a drawing, you can actually put the plexiglass over the drawing and trace it.
How are you doing? I know. That would have been good.
So the reason you want it shiny is that since you're wiping the surface, that's going to be your white. Anything that's going to print, you're carving it into the plate. That's what's going to hold the ink. Anything you want to print, you carve it into the plate. Those lines are what's going to hold the ink. The surface you're going to wipe clean. So you can add a little texture to it with sandpaper. So if you do want to pick this up as a side gig to your other work, you can use sandpaper. You like a coarse sandpaper. You can also scratch and do cross hatching. You can use different tools too. So we got a nail because that's your needle is your basic. But you can use an X-Acto knife. Anything with a nice hard sharp point to it.
How hard do you have to push down?
Oh, that's a great question. So how hard do you push down?
Yeah. How hard do you
Experiment.
push down? Okay. So
Can we print more than once?
Oh yeah, I think I have enough paper.
So if we don't like the.
Yep. I kind of thought about that ahead of
So
time.
between these two things, which would you think would be better? Either one?
Right.
Lisa? Yep. What is the internet?
So if you don't have to bear down really hard into the plate, it doesn't have to be particularly deep. If you want a nice dark line though, you want to think about that. Or you can layer very close together, cross-hatching, really tight cross-hatching, and I'll give you a tonal effect that will make it look a lot darker. Doing airbrushy sort of effect is a little bit beyond my pay grade. I don't really do that much for gradation. But like I said, the sandpaper can help you with that. You can use different gradations of sandpaper.
yes. One more piece. Yeah, that's pretty good.
And this is a lot easier than doing engraving with the engraving tools. You have to physically force the tool through the copper and draw out a little copper line. And if you're doing any kind of curves, you have to actually push the plate into the tool, and you have to use a sandbag. Because if you try to turn your wrist into the plate, you'll damage your wrist and you'll break the tip of the tool in the metal. So doing with the etching needle is a lot easier because you're drawing just like you do for a drawing pencil.
Now is the copper soft? Is that why they use
Yep.
it?
Copper is soft enough you can use it pretty easily with the tools.
Now the lithographs, what does she do?
So you have a stone of limestone, and you have it polished, and that gives a slight texture to it, almost like like charcoal paper. And you draw on it with a greasy crayon. Any kind of grease mark or oily mark on the stone will hold it. So you have to be really careful with fingerprints. But then when you develop the stone, you charge it with gum arabic and a little bit of acid, and that will kind of actually surface a little bit. And that the whole thing with lithography is that it works with water and oil to repel each other. So that sensitized area that you drew on the stone, you roll oily ink across it, and that'll stick to that etched area in the sensitized area. You take a sponge of water and you wipe the polished stone, and that'll repel the ink off of the polished areas. And then you press a piece of paper on it, and that'll pressure the ink out.
Now, how do they do the prints on that?
You have a
From one side.
somewhat similar where you have a carriage that rolls underneath the squeegee that will push down, and that'll push the paper onto the stone. But they also come up with rotary presses. They have a big cylinder.
Is your son still in the service?
People still do that too.
Oh yeah, a good friend of mine, Carolyn Muscat, who's active with the Museum of Printing, she does lithography. She's known as the Litho Queen. She's out in Somerville. She just got back from Vietnam. She got invited last year or something like that, 2 years ago, for an exhibition, and she was like, I don't know about this. But then she was greeted like a celebrity. They were like all over it. So she's gone back like 3 or 4 times now. She had a big exhibit. There's a massive Asian contingency of printmakers that are up and coming. And they're doing all sorts of crazy stuff with like lithography and
It can destroy it.
And yeah, the other drawback with the plexiglass is the plastic dust. So you do want to be a little careful with that.
Yep, just that.
You have to snort it like crack to cause any problems.
Well, I think with the amount of microplastics we're all eating.
Yeah, it's not affecting it. But you can use actually a piece of tape and just drag it across and pick up the dust, or you can use a damp cloth, a tack cloth. That'll wipe it away. Static electricity is the other problem with the plexi, but
Good energy.
we're doing such small plates, it's really not a big deal.
It's something, I've been trying to remember the name of it, where you paint it on the plate and then...
Monoprint.
It was just a monotype?
Monotype, same thing. No, it depends on who you argue with.
Yeah.
You call it a monotype or a monoprint.
This would be a monoprint, wouldn't it? It's just one color and one.
If you're painting on the plate, yeah.
But you can print this as many times as you want to. A monoprint you can only print once.
I also often get asked how many prints can you print off of a plate. Copper plates you can do a couple hundred prints. The plexi I've gotten like maybe 100, I think, before I start to see the lines starting to wear out a little bit. And you can go back in and retouch up the lines. But eventually the plate surface will wear out doing all that stuff. I forgot about paper. Let's get that paper wet. So if you feel like you're ready, I can do a quick demo of the inking part, and we can go from there.
So yeah, so this doesn't have to be necessarily very deep, does it? I mean,
You'll find out.
That means it could be a total fail.
No, it really doesn't take much. Just a light scratch on there will cause all sorts of havoc.
This is a Queen Anne's lace.
So I'm just going to grab your attention for a couple minutes just to talk about the printing part.
Things, well, then you hate them.
Yep.
Okay. Poor young, you just do hers.
I'm going to, this is my masterpiece.
Yeah.
Everything you do is amazing.
There is no pressure to create something amazing.
Yes, there is.
All right, so for the inking, you need, there's actually water-based inks out now. I prefer oil because it lasts longer, it doesn't dry instantaneously, and it gives you a little bit of flexibility. But in either case, you want either a piece of rag or felt rolled up, kind of like a felt tip marker. There's a material you can get called Easy Wipe from Graphic Chemical and Ink Company, though I don't really recommend for much for supplies because their customer service is fallen by the wayside. But in either case, you're going to coat the plate and blacken it. I've got plastic gloves if you do want to preserve your hands. The ink will not come off your clothes, and it will stain your hands. But you can use oil to get it into your skin and exfoliate and rub it out. And
okay.
Pumice soap, or hot water and soap will get it out.
Or that sandpaper you didn't bring along.
I forgot to bring sandpaper. Phone books, papers are great for wiping. Newspapers are great for ink. You can also use old catalogs. The paper is a little shiny for any kind of wiping, but you can use it for ink and paint. So you're going to coat the entire image, and then what you want to do is you want to get some old rags. I just go to the hardware store and get a box of cotton rags. The polyester is terrible to work with, but every now and then you get a 100% cotton rag, and it's great. Or you can use what's called tar linen, which is kind of like a cheesecloth. In either case, you get a rag, and now what you're going to do is you're going to wipe the surface ink off, and you're not going to use a lot of pressure. It's going to take a couple minutes to do this. And then you can grab a sheet of phone book paper. And you're
still have some of those?
Gently polish the surface. You're not using a lot of pressure. If you push down too hard, you'll actually pull the ink out of the lines. And you won't know until you've actually printed it. But the advantage with the plexiglass is you can see how much ink is on there, generally speaking. So I see little spots up there, so I'm going to grab a little more ink and push it in there. And the traditional method is to use your hand to wipe the plate, get a nice polish. Yeah. But the newspaper works just fine as long as you don't push hard. And always wipe the edges as best you can. So yeah, obviously this is going to take a little bit of finesse because you don't want to get any spots of ink on the surface.
Could you walk that around so we could take a look?
That's right. I think might have her do a little bit more harder scratching. So we'll do the sacrificial. Just like pancakes, the first one's ugly.
If we have to scratch some more, do we need a piece of paper underneath it to save the tables?
Yeah, just like you're doing.
You could use this.
Oh.
You scratch your
Or you
hands,
also
you're
got
worried
the.
about-
I'm worried. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, this is a new table. Let's scratch the table.
Yeah,
You want to come up and
scratch the table. I was thinking about ink on the table.
Oh.
So just grab a sheet of paper out of that tray. It's just regular tap water, and let it drip out. And place it on the towel.
We have lots of paper towels to put underneath it if we get ink things we want to
Just
put on
gently
the
do it
table.
again. Oh, that's really ugly hair.
Peel it up. Place it centered as best you can.
My favorite part of the edge.
Looks right. Switch places.
Good, the edge.
Yeah, I like
You're
that.
going to rotate.
We did this with Carolyn. It was a little, this little thing. We did oil
Here?
prints.
Did you? Yeah.
Oh, nice.
That's fun. I've got into it with a lithograph pencil.
You want to have everybody rush up all at once, but you'll see it when it comes off the press. There's a plate mark.
That was so,
that's a really good
I never
one.
did it again. I did that up in Gabrielle's business.
There's a girl down that participates down at Spring Grove, and she does the etchings and does watercolor on top of them.
Yeah, so do a little.
They're beautiful.
I don't know whether I have the patience to. You'd be good at
Needs to be
this.
dark, deeper.
Yep, so you have to go over your lines a little bit deeper.
Okay. All right.
You have the patience.
Unless you want to use it for reference.
I have to do my lettering backwards.
Yep.
What did you do to do that? I'm not sure.
All right, so the mine's deep enough?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Okay. All right.
Another thing I should mention too is that the oil-based ink will take about a day or two to dry. So that's something you'll want to keep in mind.
So is it a special printer's ink?
It's oil linseed oil and carbon black. It's basically what it is.
Nobody does.
But I just get etching ink. This is a company called Cranfield. They're in England.
People don't care about that stuff.
Got the chemical and they make some good ink, but like I said, the customer service has been kind of crummy.
I saw like silliness online. We're trying to do this with the plastic that vegetables and stuff.
Oh, that.
But I wonder if that would be actually the plastic would hold
Yeah,
up
the direction that I never learned.
Yeah, that's the thing too. Some people are experimenting with just like one or two prints and they're done.
Yeah,
Almost like monoprinting.
yeah.
Somebody out there took a bunch of egg cartons. And ground them up into mash and made paper.
Oh, yeah.
Looks like it seems like it works pretty well.
That looks like it might come out.
Did you get the first one?
Oh, now do I have to get
Now you have to get your paper.
any paper in here?
Before you can give me
So you're going to hold the paper up above the tray and let it drip out a little bit. Place it flat on the towel. Put half of the towel on top and then gently blot it out with your hands.
That's the ink there, huh?
Yep.
Oh, it's a lot thicker
You
than I
already
thought
got
it
the
would be.
gloves.
Yeah. You can thin out the ink. You can add a little bit of oil or lots of easy wipe. Some printers prefer it nice and goopy. So other printers like it stiff. Kind of stiffer ink works really good with really deep lines. Whereas thin ink will work really good with lighter lines.
I was thinking it was like dropper ink.
Oh, writing ink, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so go ahead and place that on the surface, on the center as best you can. I have to keep my hands all gloved up, right?
I asked the singer if she wanted help hanging
Plastic
herself.
gloves.
She said, oh no, she said everybody's just going to hang their own. I think like that.
And once you get your paper, place the blankets on top.
And then the director is like a real
And then roll,
Director of the
spin the wheel.
wheel porch.
Put it here?
Yep.
Stop about here?
Place the, yep.
Oh, they haven't went yet?
I don't know how, because I'm already
Your plate mark.
Oh, I didn't set it very well, did I?
It's just a,
Came out. Yeah, good. Nice. Well, I
Ooh, oh, that's beautiful.
I did blueberries.
Oh, and what's the paper?
And there's that's
if you
what that
want to
looks
try
like.
Oh, nice.
Isn't that interesting?
The cautions?
Very cool.
That was easier than I thought.
All right.
Ooh,
That's probably one of
that's
these.
beautiful. Thank you.
Specifically and deliberately, bring a sweater along. So you wiggle it in is what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm kind of scrubbing it in. Yep. Or rocking it in.
I doubt it.
Oh, that is lovely.
It's a doing masterpiece. Look at horse
That's a
painting it in my home at the horse house.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that was interesting. That was fun.
What are you doing?
I'm left-handed
That's okay.
today. I'm just a silly long.
So
That will be a masterpiece for left-handed.
Yep, yep.
Talk about
Here, let's see yours.
They don't like patterns.
No, I haven't drawn.
Oh, lovely. Here, hold it against your shirt.
Yeah, let's go.
Oh, wait. There we go.
Does it show up?
Beautiful. Yep.
I get it.
Because that's going to wreck your blankets and stuff like that, and might even wreck your press, even though it's a steel press. Steel versus plastic, my money's on the steel.
Yeah.
But not by much, not by much. But since this is all the same sheet of plexiglass, it's all the exact same size. And this phone book thing I learned from Tom Lewis at the Art Museum.
Oh, really?
He was the proponent on that. And you can use newspaper. Newspaper kinds of be a little scratchier than the phone book paper, but you can't get phone book paper anymore. So that's the only problem.
You have to find someone who stored them in their house.
Oh, yeah.
I got a few
All right,
old
so
yellow.
you're gonna grab a sheet of paper.
With the white pages. So.
Carol?
You're gonna grab a sheet of paper and hold it up above the tray so it drips out a little bit. And then place it on the blanket and blot it out. There's also, I learned that at the Art Museum. That was like your thing.
Okay, there we go.
Oh, perfect. Now we got two at once.
My hands are on. Huh?
Yeah.
Side
You
by side.
managed to do with your left. How'd you do that?
Just a left hand.
Awesome. Got a heart.
Yeah, whoever had their plates on there, place your paper.
Can I move this a little?
Yep. Good idea.
Okay.
So if we use our card, do we need a blanket as well?
Like I said, I've never done it. I just read about it. Somebody told me.
Is that yours?
I was like, okay,
No.
that's good.
I think it was mine.
Who's got the other
It's hers.
Okay, I did it.
Oh, you gotta put your paper on it.
Okay, I gotta do
It's already there.
And you blotted it?
Yeah, and then it's two were stuck together, so you've got
I would use
half the
two
job is
pieces
done for you.
Oh, yeah.
and just place it on there.
I know,
And then put
the whole thing.
right up on the plate.
And drive up.
Pull up the blankets and lay them down on top. So I actually want to get on this side.
Project of Colossus.
We'll stay here.
Here we go.
Excuse me. Yeah, you want a nice even floor, which this isn't. But that's
Oh,
okay.
you're not gonna find that here.
Exactly.
Do you have an even floor in your studio?
Like flat. So I put some-
And then the other blankets on top.
I don't think there's an even floor in there, except for maybe the basement.
You can come to Stowe Road and find
Spin the wheel.
hundreds of net
Oh,
files.
well, that's exactly what we did. It was about 900 by the time we were done.
If you have a really thick piece of copper or plexi, you'll actually feel it hit the wheel, and you'll get a little resistance. This one's a nice press because it's got a gear reduction, so it makes it a lot easier. You notice the star wheel on my model press. There's actual illustrations from the period where the guys are got hands and feet wrenching it through because it's direct. Like, that's a good place to stop.
No, the small
It's not a big
containers
plate, and lift those up right away.
Oh, yeah.
You'll get to do the regular
I
deal.
mean, when I was into that stuff,
You can throw the little one out the window and your wife was inside. Which was yours, Carol?
I assume they're kids.
Oh.
I
don't think so.
Exactly, that's a good
Yeah.
point.
Oh, yeah.
No evidence left behind.
Let's see.
Cleanup's pretty easy. You can use olive oil or mineral. I use mineral oil. I've got odorless paint thinner. I use a drop and it goes fine.
Very neat.
Yeah, we want to see them all.
So everybody show up at the Lauren Hay.
Oh, cool.
You gotta get this thing going. We're getting close to the end.
Pretty.
Well, I'm in line, that's all.
Line, she's in line.
Well, that came out nice.
Oh, here, she's doing inking, so that's good.
Can we tell what it is?
Yes, I think so.
Wow, you did
I don't know. It's kind of hard to see,
Did
but
you
you
sketch
kind of
for
feel.
you?
You can actually
Did you-
push the
did
ink
you-
around a little bit too as you're doing the wiping.
Oh, I just put it. No. What did you use? Oh, just the nail. Oh, no, that's hers.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
So it took the ink pretty
See the
well.
thumbprint on the
Oh,
edge there?
yeah.
Wipe it right out. Alright, so the paper, so I can do 2 at once.
I don't know if mine's gonna come out. I'm the amateur, but I enjoy art.
Wow, that is I got too much.
No, not really.
Spending all your money for your last meals.
If I had $1 for each time somebody said, oh, I can only draw stick figures when I'm doing this kind of stuff, I just think of masters. Like, I think of Paul Revere. He literally did stick figures in some of his work. Some of the other
They're hard to do,
printers.
you know. People say that like it's an easy thing.
It's really hard. What's his name? Matisse did a couple of dry points, and it's like a little line. Because it's like the outline of some woman's like butt and leg or something like that. And it's like, I remember when I first saw that, I'm like, who do you think you are, you know, Matisse, with your fancy dancing,
That's what I wonder if at the end of that
Picasso.
fancy, you know.
Yeah. And then you got something like,
Does it come in a can or?
comes in a tube or in a can. This is really easy because it's portable. But I've taken cans before.
And I think his face is too black.
This way.
That way? Okay, so I'm just gonna put this here.
No, that way. Yes.
Someone else needs paper, right?
Peel it up and let it drip out above the tray.
So what do?
And then place it on the towel.
You like
Let me see what you
Place half the towel on top to use it to blot it out.
And just
So
press
you can
on
push
it.
down. Doesn't take much. It's nice thin paper. Peel it up and then place it on top of your plate.
lift the hand first time. Lift the hand.
Yeah, so whatever you
And then you're gonna
use
put
really
the
took
blankets on
like
top.
a lot of ink, which is good, right? You're gonna get a good impression. Did you want to?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can do a whole.
Oh, does it work both ways?
Yes.
Oh, the wheel works both ways?
Yes.
Going
And
this
that was a
way.
big thing in the 1860s and 70s too. But the thing is, if you're making multiple copies.
All right, I think that's enough.
Oh, yeah, I guess it is, you're right.
If you're doing a smoky area, you gotta repeat that.
Yeah.
You gotta really know what you're doing. Or not. And just like Ronald reading today, everybody's like, oh, you can just put it, but you can totally do it. But if you're making multiple copies, if you're signing them.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's okay, I'm recording.
Oh.
Very pretty.
Not bad.
Oh, no, that's not how you write it.
Did you do it backwards?
You did it upside down, I think. Right? Oh, wait, no, that's right.
Yeah, there you go.
Very nice.
Well, I don't even know cursive when
That's yeah, what you need to get a piece of paper.
I can do idea to have Andy come by, you know?
Well, that was all Carol Frieswick's idea
I think it's not
to invite him, so Carol gets all the praise. She's right there.
Way to go, Carol. Way to go setting this up. This was fun.
Well,
I told you it's addictive. I told you it's addictive. Nobody listens to the warning.
Okay, now what do I do with the I pick up one of those? Pick up one of these.
Sheet of paper, I'm going to drip out a little bit. And then place it on the towel.
Place it on the towel.
And then put the top on the bottom, or on top. And then use that to blot it out a little bit.
Okay.
And then you peel it up and place it on top of it.
When Joanne and I settled down.
Just a habit to me like this the last Okay.
It's not him. He was sending Norway.
Did you ever go to
It's just regular water.
It's just regular water.
And you can use watercolor paper, yeah. Arches works really good.
Does it?
For etching, yeah.
I'd rather go to
Try to get this straight on it.
Oh, I see.
I hope I didn't drag one.
You gotta put everything down.
You gotta be a little careful. No, that's all right. It's I need to get a new catcher because I stupidly cut it in half, thinking I would give myself 2 instead of 1, and I should have kept it the same length as the other blankets because now it falls off all the time.
All of them over at once?
Yep, all the way over, yep. And then spin the wheel.
Spin the wheel. Oh, there we go. Now, should there be a lot of pressure on this? Or,
You came off the plate, so I might back off a little bit. Keep on, keep on.
We'll go through and explain to you how
Keep going, keep going.
every color is a different.
That should be good. All right, now peel up all the blankets.
I want to see the latest one come out, Carol.
And sometimes what I do too is I kind of keep the pressure, the nip on the catcher blanket so it doesn't go anywhere. But you know, that's all master skill.
I don't know how to do that.
Go ahead and peel her up. Sorry, I was doing a drum roll.
I think you need to paint that one.
Nice crosshatch.
All right, let's see what we got. I thought he was going to look like a skunk, and he does.
If not, that's
So if you were going to keep your plate and do it again, how would you have to clean it off with what?
You can either use oil, like mineral oil or olive oil.
Olive oil?
Or vegetable oil. And then, or you can.
Paint thinner doesn't work?
Oh no, paint thinner works awesome. You don't want to use too much because it's bad for you. But if you want something a little bit safer. And then wrap it up in paper.
And then wrap it up in paper.
Wrap it up. Okay.
Yep.
I need to wrap it up in paper.
And I've got plenty of newspapers there.
So that keeps it from getting scarred.
Or keeps the ink from getting everywhere. Because there's still ink inside the lines, and that'll.
Mike, will you be my hands so I can be the video? I mean, the paper part?
What do you want me to do?
Take the paper out of the thing and put it on the towel. Did you not do this for your own?
I don't know what.
She just wants you to do the paper part.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. I'm sorry, I wasn't understanding.
Nope, I was not clear. I just want to be able to videotape the process.
That's fine. This is the towel really is there for.
It's actually thinner paper when you get the idea.
Thicker papers will take a lot longer to wet. Some of the paper I use for the Revere is taking me like 24 hours.
Ready?
That's what we did once.
Piece of plastic.
I like him better. I like that.
Blankets go over.
I just worked in college.
Nope, the other way.
The other left. So don't mean that it's done? Where'd it go?
There's 3 blankets.
So all of them come up.
Lift the whole thing up and then drape it over the press.
Yeah, so you
You
gotta.
might need to roll it a little bit.
That is so cool. Thank you so much, Mike. And Andy. Take those 2. All right, thank you. It's the original plate, and that is the print.
The worst part about this whole process is the cleanup.
We'll be gone.
You get to do that.
I get to do that.
Do you need help?
Me.
They're actually pretty cool when you see them side by side. You see, they're like the reverse of it.
Yeah.
Very neat. Thank you.
The whole dress?
See,
They show up better on something like that.
Yep, yep. very neat. That was interesting.
That was fun. I'd like to do Japanese and Chinese art.
Oh my goodness. Oh,
Okay, I'm sure we could find someone.
Wow.
Yeah, you listen.
Ooh. Yeah, definitely.
You never know. You never know.
Very lovely.
All right.
See you.
Bye. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Can I use this camera to dry this off a little bit?
Yep, that should just be put right on top of it.
Beautiful. Look, you can even make art with the opposite hand.
I know, there's a left hand, right hand.
So talented.
Yeah, oh, I know, like a little history about.
Wow, this one's fun. Yeah, so I just put things on top of the.
I keep that off the table. I don't want to.
Yeah, sure, I'll
I will definitely let you know when I do need it.
Oh, I know.
Yes, indeed.
Right? Seems to be getting harder and harder to go over again.
I just think they use color. Put the colors in a certain place.
I just, that's my living and that's acrylics. I guess acrylics, yeah. Because you can make mistakes and you can do it over again. They're very different. But they show the show.
Oh yeah. This is actually an old. I tried doing an engraving on it, and it came out terrible. And I was like, but I engraved it for a palette. So I have some sheet glass in my studio that I've been using for years. Actually, wrapped on it. Piece of art that is really sure.